Rolex, more than a name, an absolute symbol of luxury, innovation and achievement, today valued at an impressive $11 billion, this brand was born from the tragedy and determination of a young orphan who, after losing his parents within a year, saw his inheritance taken away and ended up alone in an orphanage. But instead of letting himself be defeated, he defied fate, fled his home and crossed borders in search of a new beginning. This courage led him to discover his true passion, watchmaking. Now let's go back to the year 1881 and relive the story of the orphan boy who created Forged by Loss, Rolex. Hans Wilsdorf was born on March 22nd, 1881, in the city of Kulmbach in Germany, son of Anna and Johann Daniel Wilsdorf. He was the second of 3 children and grew up in a family that ran a prosperous iron goods business, a legacy left by his grandfather. The family occupied a comfortable middle-class position. However, his childhood was marked by tragedies. In 1892, his mother died due to illness. And to make matters worse, a year later, his father also died, leaving Hans an orphan at the age of 12. After the death of his parents, he was taken care of by his maternal uncles, who decided to sell the family business and place Hans and his siblings in an orphanage called Ernestino Coburg, located in Bavaria, Germany. There he began his education from the beginning. Hans could not accept the decision made by his uncles, which made him feel discouraged during his stay in the new city. There he was treated as an outsider and often became the target of teasing, mainly because of his religion. Faced with this challenging scenario, Hans decided to channel your energy into the studies. Over time he came to understand that although he disagreed with his uncle's choice, it had proved to be a crucial factor in his growth and success. My uncles were far from indifferent to our future, however. The way they taught me to be independent from an early age was decisive. This made me learn to take care of my things and to always look to tomorrow. I believe that it was this teaching that largely contributed to my success. Hans reflected on several occasions that he was passionate about reading. He stood out as a student, especially in the areas of mathematics and languages. He learned French and English, driven by a growing curiosity about the world and travel. He knew that this linguistic knowledge would be fundamental, which in the end had a direct impact on his career during his school life. Hans became friends with a young Swiss man who often shared stories with him about his hometown, Lech de Fonds, located in Switzerland. The city was famous for its long tradition in the watchmaking industry, which sparked great interest in Hans. Fascinated by this story, he began to wonder what it would be like to live in a place with such a legacy. At the age of 19, Hans was tired of the routine and limitations of his boarding school in Germany and decided to move to Geneva in Switzerland in search of new opportunities. There he got a job as an apprentice in an international company specializing in the export of pearls. This company bought pearls from various markets, sorted them, organized them, and packaged them to sell them to jewelers. Hans realized that the company was not really creating anything, but still made great profits. Profits, he was impressed, driven by curiosity about the company's business model. Hans delved into its tactics and began to earn good money for his age. One day, he received a letter from his Swiss friend offering him a job opportunity at a company called Kuno Korten. It was one of the largest and most renowned manufacturers of high-quality watches of its time, exporting annually around 1 million Swiss francs in pocket watches. In addition, the company also produced some of its models from scratch, being a true icon of the watchmaking industry. Curiously, Korten's headquarters were located in La Chaux-de-Fonds, the city that Hans had always wanted to visit. Although he was already in an advantageous position in the company where he worked, Hans's interest in watches and the business dynamics surrounding this industry only increased. In 1900, he decided to move to La Chaux-de-Fonds and join Cuno Corton. He was hired as an English correspondent and clerk thanks to the fluency he had acquired in the language during his school years. His starting salary was 80 Swiss francs per month. In addition to his administrative duties, he was responsible for winding hundreds of pocket watches every day, as well as carrying out tests to ensure their accuracy. This experience gave him valuable insight into watchmaking and a deep understanding of how watches were made. However, Hans's career at the company would be interrupted by an unexpected turn of events. Hans was forced to return to Germany and serve in the army at the age of 22. After completing his service, he moved to London, where he began working for another prestigious watchmaking company. There he took over the position of Chief Executive Officer of the Swiss Watch Company, greater responsibilities being in charge of expanding the company's sales. During the 2 years he remained in London, he managed to attract new customers. So over time, Hans began to nurture the desire to create his own watchmaking business. During this period, he dedicated himself to learning everything he could and preparing himself for what would be the next big step in his career. It was also in London that he met his future wife, Florence Frances May, whom he married shortly after the strength of the partnership. One afternoon, while talking to his older brother-in-law, Alfred James Davis, Hans shared his ambitions and visions for the future. He told him that he felt ready to open his own watch business, but that he needed some capital to make this dream come true. Alfred, who had the necessary financial resources and knew of Hans' passion for watchmaking, decided to trust the young man. Despite his young age, he took a risk and promised help. You realize your dream. Businessman investing his own money with a handshake in 1905, they founded Wilsdorf and Davis, Limited, a company that years later would become the famous Rolex. The duo entered into a partnership with a watchmaker called Hermann Egler, established in Switzerland, and began to import watch movements from that country to England, placing them in watch cases. They also opened an office in Bienne in Switzerland to strengthen their relationship with the partner company. In a short time, Wilsdorf and Davis specialized in the distribution of watches at affordable prices. Despite his deep admiration for watchmaking, Hans had a critical view of an important aspect of the industry at the time: pocket watches. While wristwatches were predominantly worn by women as pieces of jewelry, pocket watches were still considered masculine and utilitarian, and wristwatches were looked down upon in the industry. At the time, many believed that the main reason why pocket watches were more popular was the inaccuracy of wristwatches. These early wristwatches were much smaller than traditional pocket watches and had more compact mechanisms, which often caused variations in time, making the watch run faster or slower. Due to small faults in the movement, this inaccuracy was seen as a major disadvantage, and so pocket watches, more reliable and with a robust size being more masculine, continued to be the preferred choice for Hans. However, pocket watches were inconvenient. He found it uncomfortable having to take the watch out of his pocket every time he wanted to see the time, which became especially annoying when his hands were full up. Until that point, most people believed that it would be nearly impossible to create a wristwatch that was capable of maintaining the accuracy needed for everyday use without the time failures of the lesser models. In 1914, Hans made a bold prediction. My personal opinion is that pocket watches will almost completely disappear, and that wristwatches will definitely replace them. He was determined to create the perfect wristwatch. Hans devoted himself completely to this mission. In the following years, he traveled to several European countries, meeting numerous watchmakers and discussing in detail the adjustments needed to improve watch mechanisms. During these years, he began to develop his own wristwatch models, launching a new one each year. From the same period in which he founded his company, Each new model aimed to offer high-quality and reliable watches for both men and women, applying the knowledge acquired from other watchmakers throughout his career. When his company began to gain prominence, it quickly consolidated itself in the market, and in 1908 was already one of the leaders in the English watch industry. Rolex Hans decided that his brand needed a new name, something sophisticated, attractive, and easy to pronounce in any language. In addition, he wanted a compact name that would fit perfectly on the watch face. After much thought, he carefully combined 5 letters of the alphabet, and thus the word Rolex came into being. He immediately knew that that name was ideal. A few days later, he registered Rolex as a trademark of Wilsdorf and Davis Limited in 1908. In the following years, Rolex began to gain notoriety for its excellent quality wristwatches, quickly attracting a wealthy and sophisticated clientele. However, shortly after the First World War broke out and many companies, including those in the watch sector, faced serious difficulties to survive, with some even closing their doors. But for Rolex, the World War had a different effect. The tragic impact of the war helped to consolidate the fame of the brand, which became even more recognized for its extremely reliable wristwatches. Many soldiers began to use Rolex watches instead of traditional pocket watches, as they were more practical and safer to use, in addition to offering a precision that facilitated the coordination of attacks, allowing better compliance with deadlines. In 1914, the company had already expanded significantly, employing 60 people and establishing large offices in London, which increased its credibility. During this period, Rolex also won the title of the first precision chronometer for wristwatches in Switzerland, in addition to obtaining a Class A precision certificate from the London Observatory, further reinforcing the brand's reliability for consumers. However, despite all the success, not everything went as planned for Hans. In 1914, the British government imposed a 33% tax on all companies registered in Great Britain that exported goods across international borders, which quickly became a significant concern for Hans to avoid taxes. He decided to transfer the headquarters of his company from London to Bienne in Switzerland. Furthermore, the growing animosity against the Germans during the First World War also influenced his decision. The name Hans Wilsdorf, with its clear German roots, was beginning to be viewed with suspicion, especially because, although he had already registered Rolex, he still maintained the name Wilsdorf and Davis in England, which generated a certain amount of disdain. This also led him to completely change the name of his company from Wilsdorf and Davis Limited to the Rolex Watch Company Limited in 1915. A few years later, in 1919, Hans also registered the famous Rolex logo, the 5-star crown, which became a striking symbol implemented from then on the dials of the brand's watches. In 1919, Rolex transferred its headquarters from Bienne to Geneva, where it remains to this day. From that moment on, the company focused on the production of watch movements in Biel, transporting them to Geneva, where they would undergo rigorous precision tests and be finished with the brand's refined and high-standard design. The entire Rolex team was committed to improving the technical innovation of wristwatches. We must be able to create a watch case so sealed and resistant that the movements inside would be permanently protected against damage caused by dust, sweat, water, heat, and cold. Only with this level of protection would the impeccable precision of Rolex watches be assured. The patience and dedication of Hans and his team paid off. In 1926, Rolex launched a revolutionary model that would forever transform the watch industry, the Rolex Oyster, the first truly waterproof wristwatch in history. This innovative model featured a case hermetically sealed, offering ideal protection for the delicate internal mechanisms and making the watch completely water-resistant. Hans recognized that the innovation was revolutionary and knew that the world would soon be interested in it. but he decided to wait for the right moment to present his creation in a creative way. The master of marketing. In 1927, he heard about a woman named Mercedes Gleitzer from London who claimed to be able to swim across the English Channel, a vast stretch of water 33 kilometers long that separates England from France. Most people doubted her ability, and Mercedes was determined to prove her worth, willing to try again in front of a large audience, even with the water temperature much colder. Hans saw a unique opportunity and suggested that she wear a Rolex oyster around her neck while she made the crossing after swimming for more than 10 hours, almost dying from the cold. Mercedes was pulled out of the water, having covered about 80% of the way across the English Channel. The Rolex oyster she was wearing remained intact, although Mercedes Gleitzer's crossing was not a complete success. The Rolex oyster came out of the water in perfect condition, which caused a real commotion. People went crazy for the watch, and Hans took advantage of the moment to intensify the promotion by placing an advertisement in the London daily newspaper highlighting the event. This was the turning point when Rolex gained international fame as a revolutionary watch to further increase the boom of the moment. Hans created a creative campaign by displaying his Rolex oysters inside aquariums with real fish, a genius strategy that was implemented in all the brand's authorized stores. People who saw the watches working inside the aquariums, which generated enormous curiosity and desire for the product, the tactic. It was a resounding success, and the demand for Rolex watches took off. In 1928, Hans decided to intensify the promotion of the brand, and to do so he teamed up with the leading British model of the time, Everly Lee, to promote his watches. One of the most striking campaigns showed Everly wearing the Rolex oyster inside an aquarium, which drew even more attention from the public, and the advertising did not stop there. In 1933, the Rolex oyster appeared in the newspapers again, this time associated with a flight over Mount Everest. During the flight, the crew members wore their Rolexes and were impressed to find that at the end of the journey, their watches were in perfect working order and 100% accurate. A notable example occurred in 1935 when the famous driver and pilot Malcolm Campbell set a speed record by reaching almost 480 kilometers per hour. During the feat, he was wearing his Rolex, and Hans took the opportunity to publicize the event. Malcolm Generoso accepted the proposal but refused to receive any payment for the advertising. These events helped to consolidate Rolex's image not only as a luxury watch, but as a high-quality, accurate, and reliable model capable of withstanding the challenges of everyday life. The brand began to be seen as the ideal choice for anyone looking for a durable, high-performance watch. Only great marketing is needed to make a company successful. Transforming the market. During these years, the Rolex company continued to surprise the public with innovations such as the launch of the Rolex Perpetual, in 1931 the first waterproof and self-winding wristwatch. Although the previous Rolex Oyster had been a great innovation, the great challenge was the need to still wind it manually, which was made difficult by the tight hermetic case to wind it. It was necessary to unscrew the crown, turn it, and then screw it back in. It suffered a major setback. Exports to other European markets became expensive and difficult, affecting the company directly. And to make Hans's frustration even worse, another tragedy happened. In 1944, he faced the tragic loss of his wife. To honor her, he founded the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation, an institution dedicated to social causes. In addition, shortly after her death, he made an important decision. He transferred 100% of Rolex shares to the foundation, which to this day continues to be the owner and controller of the brand. With this action, Rolex will never become a publicly traded company or be sold, because it is essentially a charitable institution. Rolex also does not pay taxes, which makes it a unique structure in the business world. With the end of the Second World War, Rolex began a remarkable rise in 1946. The company reached the mark of 50,000 certified chronometers, something that had already been achieved 20 years ago. The following year, in 1947, sales doubled, reaching 100,000 certified chronometers, an impressive feat for the time. This growth was driven by the launch of new, innovative models. In 1945, Rolex introduced the Datejust model, the first waterproof automatic wristwatch with date indication on the dial. 10 years later, it was the turn of the Rolex Day-Date, the first waterproof automatic wristwatch that included both the date and day of the week, features that are still common today in many watches. From the 1950, Rolex continued its path of innovations, with the Rolex Submariner launched in 1953 as the most legendary model. The Submariner was the first waterproof wristwatch for deep diving, capable of reaching 100 meters deep in the ocean without losing its functionality. Hans Wilsdorf died in 1960. After his death, Rolex began to establish itself as a luxury brand that is recognized worldwide. Today, the company focused its marketing on making its watches exclusive to high society. Today, Rolex remains the most recognized watch brand in the world. From an orphan boy who started with nothing, Hans Wilsdorf transformed the watchmaking industry and built an unparalleled legacy. His commitment to precision and innovation elevated the wristwatch to a new level of prestige. Our journey through the stories of great visionary minds continues. I invite you to embark on a journey back in time with a moving documentary full of business lessons and also personal tragedies.